Hey, what's up, Canada and beyond? Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, grannies and gators. It is Wednesday, June 5th, 2024. Do you know what the clowns are up to today? Well, we're going to talk about a little bit of clown world and how absurd it is, and with the obsession of our Canadian system of governance with what can only be described as murder. And we're going to have Michelle Smith on here in just a minute. And hold on to your hats, folks. It's time in the Overton window to have some serious discussions about this whole thing. And when we start seeing the Mockingbird media mercenaries, aka the mainstream media, turning things into things that they should not be, it's time to address them publicly and loudly. So this is what we're going to do: is to give people a hands-on uh, inter you know introspective discussion on trauma and the connection to MAID in Canada in just a moment. But first, I got to tell you guys, welcome wherever you're watching here from. It is getting to be a narrow field of streaming for us these days. We are no longer, it seems, allowed to stream on Facebook, however, still allowed on Instagram. So if you're tuning into this on Rumble or YouTube, don't count on YouTube for long. They typically don't allow us to do this, but make sure that you are subscribed on Rumble and have got whatsupcanada.org and lgm.news bookmarked in your places to watch stuff, guys. It's getting dicey out there, and the sad part of that all is we've been trying to tell folks for 2 years. Like, it's going to get to the point where Facebook will not even allow us to stream at all, and looks like we're there. So unfortunately, we've still got a lot of people that are hanging on the Facebook shenanigans, and we're going to hopefully try to get them moved over to one of these other places where we can continue to bring amazing individuals with uh, expert insights and vast amounts of experience and knowledge to make it worth your time tuning into a program like What's Up Canada. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us again. Uh, you're definitely a friend of this platform, and it's because I think that you have so much valuable information. And we probably should do this more, but it's tough. You are one of the busiest ladies I know. But when I sent you this article the other day that we're gonna start on with here with the CBC. Uh, Taking liberties, in my opinion, with with what trauma really is, and we already have discussed this many times, where we have a government that seems to be stuck on murder. And to me, I was terrified when I started to see them taking this avenue, and what felt to me was like a justification. So Michelle, just for one brief minute, if there's new folks that are watching that haven't are new or have been under a rock, uh, tell the world why I think you are the preeminent trauma expert in North America. Whether you accept the kudos or not, the results the bear the discussion. So you give it to us straight, Michelle, and that's irreplaceable. So thank you for that, and let folks a little bit know a little bit about why I and all of us that know you trust you so much.
Well, I think for you guys, it's more the years of experience. I've kind of 24 years. I've watched it happen and develop, and even sometimes the studies, which are great. But it will take a couple of years before you're watching this happen all the time before you go, oh my gosh, I think I get this, because it is such a hard concept sometimes to get your head wrapped around. And then knowing how do I treat it is something else. So I do have advanced certification as a practitioner in resilience, trauma and resilience practitioner, but I also have my master's in graduate certification in complex trauma as well, and 24 years of experience. I was very focused at one point with survivors of traumatic death, which we get to talk about today, which was my forte for a very long time. And so and you, as you know, you only have to wind me up on that subject, and I'm off and running on that one. It's like a passionate subject for me. So, and that's partly because of my background, with this kind of thing, and that there's a whole world out there that people aren't considering.
Well, and it's for, without delving into that, your entire basically adult professional life has revolved around helping people dealing with death, even before as a before you became a trauma practitioner. So your experience goes far, far, far deeper even than the credentials behind your name. And these
Hmm.
are the things that make you, to me, stand out. This is why when we first met our first show, we spoke to the tsunami of trauma that we both identified that was hitting Canada at the time. And this is going back 2021, I think. And and here we are now where the CBC is coming out with an article, and this was what started the conversation a couple of nights ago, where they're saying two-thirds of Canadians have experienced traumatic events in their lives. StatsCan says. What did you think about when you read that article? Yeah, I at first I thought I was just going to get a quote from you on this, and this is where the idea of no, I'm not. We're not going to get a quote from Michelle on this. We're going to get her on live, and we're going to talk about this. So
Yeah,
here we.
well, because she sent me that and I kind of exploded, right? So I had to stop and say, "Oops, I'm sorry. You really set me off with that one." So I had to catch myself because it's such a touchy subject with me. But two thirds. Firstly, I'd like to say that I'm real glad for the acknowledgement, that there is a lot of trauma going on. But if you're looking, just for my general opinion, it's way more than two-thirds. Because you can't. There's too many causal factors for trauma. There's too many types of trauma. We and within the structure of the system itself, systemic trauma is huge and getting bigger every day. I am, and especially since COVID, I'm dealing with so much systemic trauma. You have no idea. And if you look at even the fact that I've had clients, and Dr. Peter Levine, his first client, was someone who had ether as a small child. Now that's all they had. I'm not criticizing the medical profession for using ether to put somebody out, but what they did was they put pads over the eyes and mouth. And of course, as a little kid, you're doing this. You're terrified, and then medical professionals held them down to keep
Well,
using lies. And so that trauma from that erupted, that helplessness erupted years later. I've had several clients. So if you think of that, and then you think of all the kids we held down and shoved swabs up their nose, when is that trauma going to start exploding? So
well,
you see what I
That
mean?
that was one of the things that's we've talked about this, about the word trauma becoming more of a talking point, thus entering the Overton window. But
Yeah.
part of the problem with that is the definition of the terminology and the context with which people are using this, and in the government's case, what they are leveraging this towards the justification of doing. These are the things that kind of tie into the movement of this word and this problem into this area of discussion, where now if the legacy media is talking about it, we definitely need to keep an eye on the conversation. The last time they spoke to trauma, and the MAID program was in the context of using it to balance the budget. So when we start to see this come to light again, is are we moving into another set of budget measures expansions?
Well, there's facets, Wayne. Like, I mean, if you're looking at, let's look at first the medical doctors. Lots of really great GPs out there, great as medical doctors. but we have the entire medical field diagnosing what we call mental health issues and prescribing medication for it. Well, I heard one psychologist just recently, or perhaps he was a psychiatrist, I can't remember, say, look, 50% of those diagnoses are wrong and the other 50% are incomplete. Why? It's not their field.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so we have this happening. They all use the terminology PTSD, which is incorrect. That's incorrect. And so everything gets lumped under PTSD. Well, PTSD is really has more to do with longevity than anything else. Trauma itself doesn't mean if somebody hasn't gone on to develop full blown PTSD does not in any way make their symptoms any less. It just means they haven't developed a full blown PTSD. So not everybody who suffers a trauma goes on to develop PTSD. In fact, most people don't. And so that's not correct either. But that's okay. They want to lump everything under PTSD. That's fine. But then we have diagnoses, like when we talk about diagnoses in the DSM, that I personally believe, it's my personal opinion, most of those DSM disorders are not diseases within themselves, they're trauma symptoms. So, for example, you can't tell the difference between a kid with ADHD and a traumatized one. Bipolar, which is a really common sort of thing, especially if someone comes and says, I've already had a diagnosis of PTSD. I'll say, who'd you get that from? They'll say my GP, and I'll say, oh yeah, what else? Because there's always a what else. Now it's bipolar. Well, how many times has bipolar actually been misdiagnosed when it's actually emotional dysregulation due to trauma? So we have this whole thing that look, nobody wants to stay in their own lane here. Like even the teachers, are they psychologists? Are they not that they are entirely at fault because they don't write the curriculum? I want to make that clear. A lot of teachers you're singing to the choir here, but they don't write that curriculum. But neither are they psychologists or experts in child sexuality. And most of that stuff was started with Kinsey, who was the biggest pervert that ever lived. We have people not staying. The government, giving kids free drugs. What are they? Are they addiction counselors?
This is what frightens me so much about this is where we have people that are unqualified, that it is not their field, is not their lane, but they are issuing scripts thinking that they can prescribe cures for trauma. And I'm seeing this not just not pointing any fingers at anybody, but it just is as a desperation response to a lack of accurate reflective knowledge and data and expertise within the system. And so we have this mental health system that is moving towards the pharma cure all for everything. They can do it with something like that, and it's creating a multiplying effect is my observation.
Well, you're exactly right on that, and I'm going to stick my neck out here and tell you what I believe. You cannot medicate a fear reaction stuck in your nervous system away. You cannot.
No.
So get over that. They may say, well, yeah, but you might be depressed too. You might so maybe they're trying to treat symptomology. Well, I have yet had a client. You know how many clients come through my door that says I've tried every medication. Look, it's never increased their standard of living. It has never ever helped them to deal with life. But like none of that. Why? Because the problem is still there.
Right.
And so you have, again, look, a client said to me the other day, she said, well, I did some screening on her, and she said, well, can you see me early? Because I'd like to know if there's any other diagnoses other than this. And I chuckled. I said, any other diagnoses? And she said, yeah. I said, well, it's not a matter of how many diagnoses it's a matter of where on the
It's
spectrum.
the manufactured expectation. People
I
are expecting multiple diagnosis,
I
multiple
know
prescriptions, multiple, Band-Aids,
how
for
sad.
an
How
instant remedy, an instant cure,
sad.
an easy button.
Correct.
And this is where articles like this CBC article are so dangerous because that's exactly what they manufacture.
Well, to tell people that amount of trauma, why is that amount of trauma out there? What are they doing about it? What do you understand about trauma? Because most people don't understand a darn thing about it. And that's not a criticism. Look, it's hard for anybody. It was hard for me until I started seeing it happen, and I'm going, oh my gosh, So it's difficult. So training is and proper care is everything. So it's all plus the fact that you take our history and you know you look at all the systemic trauma since the Cold War. It can't possibly be two-thirds. And then you look at what happened with COVID. In my opinion, it's not two-thirds. Also, when you talk about the diagnosis, Wayne, you have people like Dr. Peter Bregan, and he's really, just an amazing Harvard trained psychiatrist, and he will tell you straight out. He will say, "Look, you know what? There is nothing to test for chemical imbalance. That's it. Who pulled that out of thin air? There's no blood test you can take. There's nothing that can say that that even exists, and there's no lifetime study. So when you get these labels put on you and you're going to be sick for the rest of your life because this is what you have, there's no studies supporting that whatsoever. What if it's all trauma and none of it's incurable? You know, what then? And that's personally what I believe. And I've seen it often. It's really just where are you on the spectrum of things? Because everything's on a spectrum, and that's it's not a matter of diagnoses. It's those are symptoms. I don't care about the symptoms. We'll deal with the symptoms. Where are you on the spectrum of trauma? And
That's my number one identifier when I'm talking with people that I don't know anymore is that's what I'm looking for is where are you on the spectrum of trauma and misinformation and disinformation and that's where I'm looking for my engagement point at this point, and it's kind of built into me now at this point. It doesn't matter whether it's people that consider themselves awake or woke, or awake or informed, or educated. Sooner or later, I come to find that threshold of where they're at, and from there I can discuss with them to move forward. But that's become my standard issue benchmark now. Where are you on the trauma
why?
spectrum?
Why? Because you will have people who are actually high functioning, but the
Yeah.
trauma is manipulating them in various areas. They're avoiding and so on. So you have that, and then as you're going up this spectrum, you have people who are completely incapacitated by it, and they're so ill with it, and you can actually have a lot of physical symptoms. Many people have been diagnosed with things like fibromyalgia and so on that are actually trauma trapped in the system and so on. So we have this, as you know, it's just an explosion of it. And as I say, I'm glad that they acknowledge there's a high level of trauma out there, but I am not glad that they act as if that's a surprise. Number one, and number two, that you know there's no association between that and all of the rest of the garbage that's going on. And when we talk in terms of systemic traumatization, that's something hardly anybody talks about. And there's various forms of traumatization. I mean, you can have an acute trauma, which is just like one thing. It might have been maybe a vehicle accident or something, and then you've got chronic trauma. You can't pinpoint where the trauma happened in your life. It's the whole thing's been traumatized. And then you've got complex. I mean, it's like you've got these.
There's this is where it's one of those curiosities to me where I know that in your industry you will have seen and understood and what systemic trauma and abuse is through from and applying that to government systems, federal
Yeah.
institutions, military, police, government, all of these things. But
Mhm, mhm.
that whole concept of systemic anything never was never in the public space until it was associated to systemic racism, which was a manufactured crisis by our government in order to invert and polarize the smoke and mirrors thing, when at the end of the day they are the most systemically abusive, racist, trauma inducing organizations on the face of the planet. They're doing it all that they're accusing us of, and they're creating complex ripple effects of that are tsunamis of federally in government induced traumatic events that are in such a plethora and multitude. Now it's not just one thing that's creating a trauma. There are yeah, for any individual, it's a dozen different things they're being bombarded with that would be in a normal period in time traumatic enough to interfere with their lifestyle. Now it's five or six.
Well, and even their solutions are so damaging because they're keeping people trapped in this, like it's that whole adage, "Don't help me, for God's sake," because it's everything that you do. Even the victims are crying out to the liberal government, "Stop helping me," and all of these liberal people coming out of universities and so on, they're saying, "Stop helping me, you're hurting me." This has been going on forever. We only have to look at residential schools and all kinds of things to know.
Right now in the news. Right now in the news with these government designated safe injection and decriminalization. They're murdering people with this, helping in their liberal progressive helping mode, killing people because they think, and they actually, I think some of them actually genuinely believe they're helping with this, and they're stuffing it, forcing it down people's throats and communities, and offering absolutely nothing as far as tangible, not even a real discussion, which I know you fight very hard for to get this recognized as differentiating, this systemic abuse to things that are real and things that we can and should be doing. But they don't want to talk about what mental health it really is, and how to appropriately treat trauma. They are continuously moving, as we saw on our show on Monday night. They won't offer treatment for Lyme disease, but they'll offer you a deletion jab. That's the go-to, and we're seeing this, so that's becoming so normalized. And people that young people, they can't get a date and they got zits, that creates such a trauma for them that's acceptable for them to qualify for the program. So when they're saying what I'm hearing, when they're telling me that two-thirds of Canadians are suffering of trauma, they're telling us that two-thirds of our population qualify for self-deletion at their program. Step on up.
Well, here, yeah, exactly. Well, here's the thing as well is, with the kind of solutions they're coming up with, they continue to deprive people of their dignity, their
Mhm.
motivation, their ability to move forward, their humanness, their all of their autonomy, like being accountable for behavior and choices and decisions. That's what gives us our autonomy, our power, our personal power, all of these things. They're depriving them of it, and they continue to deprive them of it. This is not a solution for anybody. You're depriving people of their humanity, their dignity, and so on. And so those, by simply saying, well, if somebody's a drug addict, let's just give them drugs. Wow. you know,
Yeah,
I like the whole idea of these types of things as a solution. I keep wondering who came up with that. Whose idea was that? Because you're keeping them in a cycle of they are. When I passed a poor guy today on the way in to do some work, and I he said homeless, not help, not hopeless. That was his sign, and I thought, you know what, you're right. You are homeless,
that,
but you're
that,
not hopeless.
that's and that only magnifies and quantifies exactly what we're seeing happening on a national level, where they are destroying the economy and people's ability to live. 2 years ago, Canada already had the fastest growing rate of homelessness in the entire G20. That has only exponentially exploded. 2 million people a month is a double increase at the last I heard over the year before, people using the food banks. And the common discussion amongst people standing in line waiting for their food that they that they're desperate for is maybe MAID a better choice than suffering the indignities of poverty when there is there is no real legitimate help, and the food bank is the best option at help that they've got in a real world. The only other option is the government telling them, well, we can offer you a self-deletion program. They're manifesting this. They're creating a level of hopelessness, that is completely irresponsible when you look at the level of all of the rest of the corruption and expense that they're engaging in.
Yeah.
Um, these things, they all fall into, without getting into the conspiracies behind this. When people understood the deeper side of the UNSDA and the agreements that they're agreeing to with all of this, and the transition to a pharma economy, and comply or you are uh, we are so close to the even far greater atrocities, I think, than what the worst regimes in history have achieved. And when they have, this is again comes back to the normalization of taking yourself out, where anything is a good reason and an excuse to delete yourself, for whether it's to save the planet or to hypothetically donate your organ to save somebody, because that is, they don't want to treat you. This justification for murder. Um, I think we're being far too easy on the people that you know.
Well, somewhere along the line, we started listening to perpetrators for our advice instead of victims. And like with the whole maids idea, it runs parallel to sexual abuse and so on. And this being, here, what are you hearing from perpetrators? Well, it's just a sexual preference, and I think for who, not the kid. I,
Yeah,
you know, I
yeah,
can, and so every psychologist or mental health practitioner or counselor and so on that is telling you about the long term trauma and damage this does has been completely wiped out. And we're just going to listen to perpetrators because so the maids thing, look, there's so much to that. And so suicide of any kind causes trauma beyond what you can imagine. And the reason it does is because you are now dealing with usually complicated grief and complex trauma. They're two different things and they're functioning like a sandwich. And this can go on for so long, and the despair is gut wrenching. The self blame is gut wrenching, and so on. And so, but it doesn't matter whether that is assisted suicide or not. It usually affects anywhere between 5 and 10 people can be traumatized by a suicide death, and this is probably one of the longest hauls, when it comes to trauma. And a lot of that, if you just take the family, I'll just give you an example of that. I was talking to someone once about a man who was, his family was kind of didn't know what to do. Doctors didn't seem to know what to do, and the hospital, the nurse felt that they should just let him go. So she had convinced the son of that, but the following day she thought, good, it's great, just let him go. Well, when she came in, they had an IV going and something else, and she was angry. And he said, well, I couldn't convince my mother to let him go. And I asked her, why were you angry? Well, they should have just let him go. And I said, look, you know what? You're dealing with someone who loves that man, and you convince them to pull the plug before they have had the opportunity to try everything they possibly can. They are going to wind up in my office because they are going to be agonizing over whether they have done the right thing. Did I do it true? Was there something that could have helped him? I caused somebody's death that I loved. They will be so traumatized. I said, you'll walk away as a medical professional and pat yourself on the back saying, wow, like that was a really good job. And you will never see that family again. I will see them. There is a whole life going on outside of what we are seeing and what the medical profession and so on is pumping us full of. These are people with families and so on. You have no idea when families make a choice like that. So when we have maids, let me even extend that further. There's a young girl, I think she's about 26, works in an assistant living care home, and two of her elderly have chosen this. Now these are people she knew well. She's the kind of kid who would get home late one night a week because she'd be going and visiting with them. Because they didn't have anyone, and so both times she entered work. Supervisor is hysterical, crying, pulls her into the office, tells her that this is going on. She says when, and they say right now. All she can do is sit there completely helpless, knowing that somebody that she knows and cares about is being assisted with dying. And she's sitting there knowing it's happening, and she's completely helpless to do anything about it. She's just sitting there, nothing she can do. Traumatized, both of them, and probably more in that
Well,
this.
I've got some personal testimony that I can't really do anything with except share the experience of hearing. I'm somebody that works within the food industry in acute cares where they would have patients and they would be told to put the food on the floor. And they were then the next day uh, in the elevator with the remains of the person that they were told to put the food on the floor for because they had been deleted, and so they left their job, so exactly to the point of that it was so traumatic for them seeing what the hospital is doing at an industrial scale that they had to leave a job that they depended on, and these are the things that nobody else is seeing. So
No,
personally, I believe this is an intentional agenda for every termination that the state creates. They manufacture 10 more people qualified for that same solution that our government favors, and it seems to be the within the top three solutions offered at every level, for any issue at this point, that it's right up there with the preferred solutions.
this same young girl would go home from work after this had happened, head for her bedroom, nothing to eat, curl in the fetal position, and sob herself to sleep every time. Just sob until she finally fell asleep. The sheer helplessness of having someone being assisted dying that you knew only feet or yards away from her, and her inability to do a darn thing to stop it or to, or anything. And the supervisor sobbing. You're dealing with, it's not just family, you're dealing with people here.
And
Such trauma.
I fully believe they are fully aware of this. This is, and as we heard Mark Holland here not that long ago saying that they were only putting a bit of a break on these the expansion of the MAID programs because they couldn't find people that were willing to take
Right.
part in it. And then here on Monday, the headlines are, they're going to now import foreign caregivers, whether they can even speak English or not, and replenish the system with foreign caregivers. Why? Because those people have absolutely zero, and they won't bother them to go through the things that we've just described by a workforce that a Canadian workforce would experience and resist. So this is again that replacement of the non-compliant population through, uh, you know gobbledygook and false fronts and fraud, so that they can maintain their trajectory of expanding the termination of Canadians. That's just how I see it fitting together, and I can't see it any other way.
Well, I can't understand how we have sunk as human beings to this level. Who do you suppose is picking all those traumatized people up off the floor? Do people not understand when this happens to someone, a survivor of this, do people not understand how desperately they're affected, how crushing it is for them, and how bad that trauma can be? Because now they're grieving and they're traumatized, and it can take a long time to work through that. It's a big thing. Some people call it traumatic grief. I don't, because that insinuates it's a certain kind of grief. It isn't. It's two things, and they're functioning like a sandwich in that person. Look, it's horrible. If that person has had a suicide before, a trauma before, that's going to explode when that happens.
I,
So
I I would have a curiosity as to, for each event that of these medically assisted murders, how many people walk out of that room with additional prescriptions to deal and cope with
exactly,
what they,
exactly.
yeah. There's likely a room full of people gathering there at the end of the event, and how many of them are walking out the door with some sort of artificial coping mechanism? So they have, boom, hit the jackpot on more clientele.
And what are we planning on doing? Are we planning on euthanizing the whole works we've just traumatized? How can I know excuse me, I can hear my dog in here and I need to ouch. His chain scratches along the floor, drives me crazy. um, sorry. um, we don't see past the what we're being fed in terms of work worldviews, medical worldviews, government worldviews, this kind of thing. We're not seeing past that. We're not seeing past into families and homes and relationships and love and caring and what happens to these people. Um, and again, there's never been any mention of any of that. It's shocking that nobody has mentioned what happens to these survivors of this.
Right.
They only carry on patting themselves in the back that they come just how in God's name did we ever sink to the point where we thought that ending someone's life was a good solution,
Well,
to anything?
that's the, right, the ultimate inevitable end conclusion to the war on the nuclear family and our culture and our
Yeah,
faith.
yeah.
And I think you and I have talked about this probably in privately.
Mhm.
Um, with when it comes to that, I think that plays a huge part in it. I don't think that this is something that the Islamic faith exactly runs to fill the quotas for, or any other faith. So they are particularly, again, targeting old stock Canadians with the removal of faith and culture and making these kinds of things normal and acceptable. And that's not to say any other faiths aren't participating in some capacity, and probably in the capacity it maybe was designed for initially, and I'm still not saying that that's okay. I am not okay with that, but at least it's understandable. But right now, this is completely not understandable. It is their catch all, cure all for every diagnosis, for every illness, every boo boo that they manifest, that they tell people, you have an incurable sociological disease, and now your only out is this, or take these drugs for the rest of your days, when the reality is, through some accurate reflective treatment, a great majority of these people would never have to suffer again, but the
Right,
government prefers them dead.
right. There's no money in that.
Right.
There's no money in healing. It's a sad state of affairs when people actually believe they're not offering any hope. They're offering hopelessness, and that's really sad, incredibly sad. And it's it's like you mentioned prior, just a minute ago, when we're talking about the connections between the system and kind of what's going on. I read an article how BC was patting themselves on the back for being the largest organ transplants from maids anywhere. And I thought, my good God, this is not something to pat yourself on the back for. This is something that should be investigated.
I just watched a video, yesterday, as a matter of fact, about a firefighter who had, done such a heroic act, but, it had left him damaged, and, prognosis wasn't good, but, he probably still had time left, but he was coaxed and poked and prodded, and sold on the fact that, he would be able to help 4 people if he self-terminated now, so he did, and that destroys me. That destroys me from the inside out when I and they're celebrating this, it's such a
They
victory.
are.
Such a
They are
victory.
celebrating, and you could think of it, and they said right in this article, well, people feel good about the fact that they can kind of live on helping other people. I thought, oh my God, is this what you're offering people? Like, how manipulative? And they're doing. They said that places like BC Transplant and so on are actually doing seminars about this. Like, I just want to sit down and cry. I absolutely am horrified.
It's like the 32-year-old girl with the Lyme disease. Don't wanna treat her for that, but they'll use her organs to, do half a dozen, $250,000 surgeries, because that's where the money is at, treating this girl. There is no money in that, but go ahead, kill yourself. We'll harvest you up.
Exactly. Well, the other thing is that there was a lady. There was a write up in the paper about her. She'd gone into the Vancouver hospital and she was suffering from some depression. It was causing some suicidal ideation. She knew enough to. I need to go get some help. Obviously, she wanted to live, or she would not have walked through the hospital doors saying, "I need some help here." She went in to get some help. She was sat down saying, "We don't have a bed for you." It's probably true. It'll be months before you can see a psychiatrist. That's also probably true. But there are other people that can help. Knock it off with this psychiatry thing. Really, honestly, give me a break.
Well,
But they did say to her, but I think it was a nurse or somebody said, yeah, we can offer you maids. She
yeah.
said she walked out of there and she said, I have never in my life ever felt as if my life was so worthless as the
Yep.
day I walked out of that hospital. And the only thing that the hospital administration said is true. We're sorry if that upset anybody.
Well, and this, ties right into the comment that I've got pulled up here. It won't be long before vaccine hesitancy becomes
Yeah,
vaccine hesitancy disorder and a threat to society, and we must be put down. We've talked about this,
true.
and this is exactly the point of the lowering the threshold of the sanctity of life. What are they more interested in? In a comment before is too big to put up here, but why they are bringing certain populations and demographics to this country because they are compliant. They don't mess around with tyrants because they know what happens with tyrants. We're still the ones that are mouthy enough to think that we're going to stop the tyrants just with our mouths, whereas the ones that we're being replaced with, no, they'll take this. They'll understand exactly what it's like to live under the auspices of the expert class and the power through terror and fear and manipulation. So, yeah, this is a this is a dangerous trajectory that the normalization of this we are not doing things the right way. We need to look at that's not murder, the taking of other life, is not a cure for anything, not even in war. We hate war. Why? Because it is murder. And now here we are literally transforming it to, Sunday over brunch discussion like Joseph Mengele and the Nazi medical staff. It's really becoming that normalized where it's not worth what not it doesn't even get noticed. It's like when I was in Edmonton at that speaking at that event, and the fellow that had done the documentary in Auschwitz and talked to one of the survivors, grown raised in Auschwitz, and they said, "Well, did you know that they were killing Jews?" And he said, "Yeah." We knew by the color of the smoke and the smell. Well, you didn't do anything about it. Well, we needed our jobs, and we are literally right there where the gas chambers have become the injection sites, and our countries and nations are squabbling over who's going to get control of the next bioweapons programs that they can use these kinds of population controls. And if we don't comply, we'll just be replaced.
Well,
So,
it's
those-
interesting that you say that because we're back to if we can, twist our moral guide stick and call ourselves the biggest humanitarians in the world by putting people down. You know what I mean? We're losing it. We're losing our moral compass and what is right, what's wrong. This is wrong on so many levels. But it's not just murder on the MAID's issue. That's a big one. That's a big one with me is the MAID's issue. It isn't just murder on that issue. When you look at COVID and you look at our youth, we traumatized a generation of young people. We truly did. In fact, we traumatized pretty much everybody, but we did traumatize a group of youth and young people. Everyone knows who knows anything about trauma that if you look at an addict, a drug addict, one of the first things you're probably asking is, where's the trauma? If you ever listen to Gabor Mate, who worked with addicts on the east side of Vancouver, he will say it is a symptom. You should be asking, where's the trauma? It's a trauma symptom. So what do? We take a whole slew of kids that we have just traumatized and we offer them free drugs. What could possibly go wrong?
right?
You
What
know
could
what I mean?
possibly go wrong? You know, but
Like,
yeah, and so this is my layman's observation simply by the environment that I live and exist in this, information war this that we're in, and the battles that I see across the world. The people that are the strongest are the people that have overcome the worst traumas.
yeah.
And we talk about this often. People that actually get through trauma come out the other side with a sense of cause and purpose and strength that is undeniable and unstoppable, and that is why they don't want any actual real assistance or help or people being cured from trauma. Because when people actually figure out who is responsible for the trauma, who is guilty, who needs to be held accountable, where the transparency must happen, where justice must happen, because you don't get through trauma until you deal with those kinds of things. Because there's a step program to this, just like there's a we talked of a scale, where are they on the scale? There's a process through a real process through that, and I'm not going to say anything about that, not my wheelhouse, but this is just my observations. This is, to me, in my mind, how do I justify, why do they not want to help or deal with trauma? Why do they not want to accurately identify it? It's not rocket science. They know. They are just avoiding it because they will only make more people, they will allow people to become strong and healed and become more Michelles and Waynes.
Well, I got to tell you, there's something very tricky about trauma. I always used to say it's a devil's favorite tool, and I still say that. And the reason I say that is because it is these reactions that are stuck in the nervous system are going right underneath the person's conscious awareness. These are not conscious reaction. So in essence, what's happening is it's overriding the will. Okay, so if you look at our history now, which is a message I actually have for people, if you look at our history back to the Cold War, you will find there was a lot of experiments going on for trauma based behavioral control. Mengele did them. They were done right in Canada. They were done in the US, these trauma based behavioral control. Since that time, what have we seen? Acid rain, H1N1, it's been consistent. 9/11, terrorism, threats of war, pandemics, and so on. It has been one consistent trauma after another on a large scale. And then COVID hits, kaboom. So we have been systemically traumatized. Then you look at all of this, and I go, this is a blueprint for trauma. Somebody knows what they're doing here. Now, I got to tell you, I believe that. I firmly believe somebody knows exactly what they're doing here. Because when you take all the things that I use to help heal trauma, which is, helping people, into part, sense of belonging, meaning, community. Well, they ripped anything that could heal. They ripped that out, right out from underneath people. So you can't. It's hard to heal from individual trauma when when communities are in shreds. It's almost impossible because that's our safety, and that nervous system is constantly scanning for safety. But here's the key thing: when you have fear trapped in your nervous system, the powers that be do not give two tinkers damn about your outrage. They only care if you're going to act on it. And if there is fear trapped in your nervous system, it's going to keep you from acting on it.
Well, this is, when I look at the trajectory of the rise of the expert class and the fraud within that, and and this is are things that were only subjects of interest to me when I was under learning about neuro linguistics programming, and and you start to look at, well, where does that originate from? Where does the where was the research in this science for all of this? And when I understand the application of that to scale of social media, where we have these this neurolinguistics programming manufacturing disorder and trauma on its own, and then being quantified, massed, broadcast across the spectrum, where social media has now become that broadcasting tool to make sure that people remain in that traumatized state. Anytime you are plugged into any form of mainstream content or political narrative, it is there to reinforce exactly that, the linguistics that they are using within all of that. And I'm just a dummy, but through repetition and understanding of it within this warfare, I see this. And so it's really, when I'm going through that scale of where people are on the scale, that's the point of understanding where they are understanding where the language is still hitting them, and
Mhm.
how we can try to address things in a way that snaps that satanic lullaby, because that's what I call it, the satanic lullaby. And we've become to these accustomed to these little shots of dopamine that are triggered, good, bad, or otherwise, through the moral outrage. They control us through the moral outrage, the shell shock, to direct us in the directions that they want to go.
Exactly. Well, one of the first things I usually tell my traumatized clients is, well, just, there's nothing wrong with your head. Let's get that straight.
Right? You're not crazy.
You're not crazy. This has nothing to do with your brain or your head. Nothing. But I had one guy tell me, well, I couldn't find any help here, and he went 5 years through all the medical stuff that they were diagnosing him with and throwing him in the hospital, and medication. Finally, after 5 years, he finds out he's suffering from trauma. He flies all the way to the UK to get some help, and before he found me, and in 3 or 4 months time, he's already on the road to recovery in a big way. Like, we um we can't we can't ignore this anymore, Wayne. And people need to know that even if they don't really understand or don't feel, there's fear trapped in your system, fear not gone full cycle and coming out in an action when it's trapped there is going to keep you from actually acting on what you know to be right. So turning that fear into, into some fighting for what's right, and getting some proper care is really essential, because they don't care about our outrage.
And this is where I think it's so important for us to have the conversations when we have the opportunity, when the Overton window is there for us to have them, because exactly like some of those things that we are us having this conversation and people actually paying attention to it and understanding it is what they fear the most, right? Because it ultimately lets people realize that I'm not alone in this. I am not crazy. There is, what they're telling me is the cure and the solution and the direction doesn't necessarily have to be the case. And there is some place that they can start, to have a more calming, comforting sense of at least being able to look. The helplessness of not even having an understanding is where we make the break the ice of that satanic lullaby, and like common here, the Marxist media. This what they endeavor to continue to pump out, that regular scheduled programming, to keep those neurolinguistics triggers rolling, and why they fear us so much that they must censor shows like this and discussions like this on every darn platform, under the fear of threat and
Yeah.
abuse.
Yeah.
And that's again another trigger. They want you to feel like they're going to come into your living room and lock you up if you share this, whether your brain tells you it's real or not. That's how they want you to feel.
Well, and let me throw out a what if scenario, Wayne. What if, they did all these experiments in the Cold War, and on, and then because of all the experiments they did on everybody, and they, perhaps turned a whole lot of it onto people in the general population. What if they then said, okay, well, we're going to create all these diseases based on the symptoms in order to hide what we're doing, and we're going to make a killing. you know, so are these just nothing more than an attempt to hide trauma, to hide what they're doing? Like, people, there's enough talk now that people are starting to understand. But here's the problem: we have and I was subject to neurolinguistic programming when I went through some corporate training for about 3 weeks, and there's a very small percentage of the population whose brains won't let that in. And
Right.
I kept dissociating. I kept taking a walk, and I couldn't figure out what's going on here. What is going on? I can't focus. I can't, that's he was I thought he's practicing NLP. That's what he's doing. And that's exactly what he was doing on these managers, for 3 weeks. And when he admitted it and said, I can affect your subconscious without you even knowing it, I knew what he was doing. And I thought, that's why I keep taking a walk. It's like, I can't, it was awful. I just couldn't stay focused. And that's what he was doing. Well,
That's the gaslighting. That
exactly.
is all the gaslighting that they, and like the comment I was just showing there is, want you to think that you're doing this for your own good and they have your best interest at heart, when you're intuitively knowing that this is definitely just not right. And their solutions and cures are they're not, their excuses and justifications.
It's such a huge deception. But be careful, because now that trauma is being talked about a wee bit more, what they're going to come up with it scares the heck out of me. Because they look, if if this is what they have done, they're not going to come up with anything. People now are out there hanging out a shingle saying, well, I treat trauma, when in fact maybe they were counselors and they took a course in it. Trauma is not the kind of thing you can take a course in. It is the basis of everything. That should be the 4 year study. You take a course in everything else, not this.
Right.
Because it is way too extensive for that. So you have to really watch where you're going for help. And because that's sort of been the MO of the whole thing. Oh, I'll just go take a course in it. Yeah, that's not going to work.
It's the wild, wild west out there for self-help, right?
It
It
is.
is.
Yeah. So if they come out all of a sudden with, okay, there's a lot of trauma out there, so we're just going to demand everybody takes this training course, somebody better start laughing in their face, because I'm telling you, it is extensive
Yeah.
training for trauma. And so I am a little bit worried. The more they talk about it, I'm worried a little bit about what they think they're going to come out with, because so far they haven't come out with anything good. Why would I expect them to come out? It's only, I have visions, Wade, that this is going to make my life harder. Like,
Well, that's the one thing that I tell people is you get to clean up the messes of all of these failed programs and these delusional
yeah,
utopian ideas. The ones that survive long enough, end up in your periphery, and this constant push and movement towards these kinds of things, and the normalization of these things that we should just be abhorrently intolerant of, and the pressures that they use and the gaslighting. This is something that they want to expand upon, and at the end of the day, we're in the window where people are listening in the positions of power simply because they are desperate to hold on to their positions of power. So this is an opportunity for us to speak loudly to some of these kinds of things and say, enough of this, and educating people on that is the first step to that, and arming them effectively and accurately, so we have at least a hope of snapping the satanic lullaby of illusion of all of this. And don't
You.
we
I
kind
A
of
lot of people are waking up. Here's the issue with that, though. To realize that the very people that you thought you could trust, the very people that you should have been able to trust, people that actually had authority over things in your life, were not trustable. That's traumatizing.
Well, that's one of the other fights that I take them all on, not just MAID and all of this, but
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
another one for another day, dealing with the institutions of accountability and the failed trust there. I live in the failed trust of the media, and
yeah.
we speak to the failed trust in in the establishments and the institutions, and the systemic abuse that is from those, and the horrors and atrocities. There's some testimonials of horrors and atrocities coming up in the chat, and I'd love to get into so much more of them, but we're kind of already over our time, and I want to be really respectful of that, Michelle. Thank you so much for taking the time to vent with me today on this.
Thanks for having
Uh, obsession that our government has with murdering its own citizens. It's got to stop, and the and then to recognize when they are trying to justify those kinds of things, and why. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, please, folks, don't stand up for this one and don't be silent about it. This is horrendous. We can't possibly allow ourselves to be lowered, as humans to this level.
The further they disconnect us from our communities and our families and our faiths and our culture and our society, the
Yeah.
easier it is for them to prey upon us with these stop the suffering solutions. So
Have you got people, Wayne, that are putting comments in that they're suffering at all?
yeah, there are people that are going through stuff for sure.
Yeah, well, I see that a lot, when I have come on an interview, and I'm so sorry. You really need to get in touch with someone who can help you through it.
And if they're first, and my rule of thumb would be, if the first thing they do is offer you a prescription, that's probably not the help you need. Keep looking.
Most definitely not. Don't don't go there. Don't go there. So, you're welcome. I know you had another article, but sometime we can discuss. That's actually on where all of the our education system sexual stuff came from, and she's quite an amazing lady. So maybe we can talk about that some other time. She's
Well, that'll fit in. I was putting some stuff together on Soji and some of that too. So
yeah,
we'll
she's quite
we'll
amazing.
get you back to talk about that one real soon, Michelle. So
Okay.
uh, thank you for so much for taking being brave enough to do and have these kinds of discussions with me when I think that they're necessary, or you. So uh,
Well, it's better than you saying something to me and me screaming at you on the phone, Wade. So,
well, that happens a lot, where I'll bring up something, or you'll call me about something, and it's like I'm thinking later was, that we should have recorded that. So we did tonight. So again, thank you so much, Michelle, and
thanks, Wayne.
we'll
Talk
see you again
talk to you.
real soon. All right, guys. That was Michelle Smith, one of the people I look up to most when it comes to actually making a physical difference one on one. That lady is a hero, in every definition of the term that you can think about it. So, if you guys have kind of noticed, we're getting back to a regular scheduled programming, 6 o'clock Central, Monday to Friday, and tomorrow I've got a bit of a preview for what we're going to be digging into tomorrow. We're going to be talking a little bit more in depth, pulling back some of the layers of the Ukraine Russia World War III fiasco. Uh, wow, guys, there's a lot more going on than what meets the eye, and definitely not what the legacy media is telling you about. And I know I've been kind of teasing a little bit about another foreign meddling and interference organization. Just life kept stacking up when I talked to Michelle. That was supposed to be the plan for tonight. What you're seeing here listed for tomorrow was initially going to be tonight's show, but we'll get to this stuff tomorrow. Michelle, your voice was far more important to me. So we're going to talk about another organization in Canada that people have probably never heard of that has far, 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 far probably too much power, reach, and influence in the political spectrum that we've probably never heard about. We're going to talk about some of the attempts, poor attempts by some individuals to intimidate me into taking part in their initiative, whatever it might be. We'll get into that a little bit tomorrow. He wants to intimidate me about not taking part in their stuff. Okay, well, we'll put that under the microscope for you all to see and decide where this discussion should go from there. And at the end of the day, this is going to be a learning discussion for warning signs. The last thing that we can afford to do is to become that which they fraudulently accuse us of right here, right now. So don't fall into the traps. The false flags and psyops are abundant out there, guys. They are, yeah. There's almost as many of those as there are activist groups at this point. So we're going to take a look at one and let you guys be informed at least of what it could potentially or potentially not be. But we will take that lesson together collectively. And until then, I love you all. Stay mighty, my fellow hostages. This is a really great time if you see fit to consider helping us keep active and on track and breaking the news out of the noise and giving you guys the relevant information you need and the people you need to hear from. This is how you can help us. Much appreciated in advance. And those that have helped along the way so far, God bless you. We could not still be doing this without all of you. Not today, not tomorrow, not yesterday. And we are living in a point in time in history with the Marxist media and the censorship that I believe that independent media has never been more necessary, partly because they've become fairly formidable. And this is a symbiotic relationship. We're only able to do what we can do by others doing what they can do, and in some capacity that helps keeps keeping the machine rolling. So appreciate y'all for those of you that do take part. And if you're looking at anything else on how to defund the cabal, we will show you a little bit of a play out clip on that. That is one of my favorite subjects to discuss. If you want to join us in a group discussion on that one day coming up soon, we'll come up with a date for that. So I love you all. Stay Canadian, stay mighty, stay strong, my fellow hostages, and we will see you same time, same place, 6 p.m. Central tomorrow.